Hello again, everybody. Welcome to episode 009 of Coco and Daltz.
I love your radio voice.
Thank you very much. This show is brought to you by nobody yet, but we're working on it.
We're willing to take any money from anybody and shill your product, program, or service.
So we can quit our high-paying day jobs.
As a yoga instructor.
As a nothing instructor is what I am. By the way, this is Coco and Daltz, and I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Daltz.
So, again, because it worked so well last time, I'm going to preview what we had in this show, or what we're going to have in this show.
Oh, okay.
Coming up.
Once again, we're ending on the down note this week, actually.
Yes. Oh, you've seen the lineup, have you?
I've seen the lineup.
You've peeked at the lineup.
The crack team of researchers brought me your notes.
It's up on the board right over there on the fancy electronics that we have in the studio here.
It's the electronic scroll like they have around Times Square, like the news scroll.
We spare no expense here at Coco and Daltz. So the first topic we're going to talk about, I'm going to go down the roster here. It's an action-packed, fun-filled episode, people.
It's like Black Panther.
009 is the one that you're going to want to circle on your calendar.
Are we really up to 9 already?
Yeah, we are.
We're almost in the double digits.
We're almost a legit thing.
Wow.
Yes.
Too legit to quit.
So, first topic will be Queer Eye, which is the exciting new show on Netflix, and it's a bit of a reboot. Second topic will be Alias Grace, which
is also on Netflix.
Coincidentally, is also on Netflix. Not that we're addicted to the Netflix. And third is going to be a mystery topic that we will leave people hanging, so it actually is a shallow attempt to get them all the way through the podcast.
Right. Apparently, there is a way where you can tell if people listen to the whole podcast or skip around, and we don't know how to do that yet.
No, we do know how to do it. We know exactly what you're wearing and where you live.
That's kind of... We're like Marky Mark. We're back to Marky
Early
Mark.
with the Marky Mark this time.
We're kind of creepy.
So Queer Eye is
not
a reboot.
Creepy. Yeah.
Yes, not creepy. We have watched 2 episodes so far.
You watched 2 episodes. I watched 1.
That's true.
Yeah.
We, the collective we.
Yeah.
And it has been rebooted on Netflix. It was on Bravo. For those of you who don't know, it was called Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And then they shortened it to Queer Eye during that time, as our crack research staff has told me.
And apparently they decided to keep it shortened for the Netflix reboot because they're not only helping straight guys now, they're also helping
non-straight guys, everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. So the original premise was 5 guys who are gay, and this is a bit of a stereotype, but in some ways it's true. Because they have so much style and so much charisma and so much more and so much better taste, etc., conceivably, than straight guys, then the gay guys would help the straight guys get more style and get groomed up and get looking like they should and not look like they lived in their mother's basement all their lives.
Right. Learn basic grooming techniques.
Hygiene.
Right.
Things that people theoretically, their parents probably should have taught them.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was a great show. I loved the original show. It ran from July 15th, 2003 until October 30th, 2007 on Bravo. Now we're back on Netflix. That old one lasted 5 seasons for 100 episodes. It also introduced me to the whole idea of being a metrosexual, where you could be a guy who is straight and care about your clothes and care about how you looked and care about your grooming and care about all these sorts of things that I think is really important to be a guy. You don't have to be over the top about it, but just pay attention to what you're wearing and be... and care. That's all you have to do. A lot of guys, I think, in some days have been just like, get home from work and sit on the couch and not really pay attention. Don't get in shape or don't pay attention to what is good. Well,
and I did used to work with a guy at our former place of employment who thought it was acceptable to go out in public in pajama pants. Right. So he was maybe ahead of his time in some ways, judging by today's society. So the reboot now, same idea, 5 guys. The old episodes were based in New York City. This one is based in that hotspot known as Atlanta, Georgia. Well, is it based there, or are they kind of going everywhere? Because
from what I understand, they're based there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a little tricky. The first 2 episodes I've seen were great. One was an older man who was 57 years old, looking to. He was sort of a bearded guy. He loved the whole bearded thing. He wanted to look like ZZ Top. That was his goal. Wanted to get his ex-wife to go out on a date with him to a car show. And it was really endearing how the Fab Five came and embraced him. And he was all in. He was from the get-go. He was like, yeah, make me better and all this sort of stuff. He had some challenges. He had lupus and he had thinning hairline and he was a bit overweight. And he had this horrible recliner that had stains on it that they got rid of immediately into the dumpster. So there was a lot of fun stuff about that. The second episode, which I just watched, but we watched together, what were your impressions, Coco?
Well, I enjoyed it. I liked it a whole lot more than I thought it would. The second episode, they made over a single straight Indian guy who had super long hair and a super long beard, also a la ZZ Top, and they made him look fantastic. And initially, he was very hesitant.
I think in India, by the way, sorry to interrupt you, it would be ZZ Top.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forget the.
I think it would be the Commonwealth.
Yeah, right.
Sorry,
vestige of colonialism. But yes. Oh, big words. Take a shot.
I don't think Scotty and Cheryl are listening anymore.
Aww.
Judging by our download numbers.
So, anyways.
Moving right along.
So he was very hesitant initially. I can't talk. But then he went along with it. And
he was very reluctant.
Yeah, he went along with it and he opened up and he looked fantastic when they got done with him and they made him look not like ZZ Top. And I didn't want to watch the Queer Eye reboot because I had seen previews for it and the guys just all seemed so over the top, like stereotypically, like flamingly gay.
It seemed campy.
It seemed super campy. Yeah. And I was like, if this is how every episode is going to be, like, I don't want to see these 5 guys fighting to be so over the top for airtime. But
well, and both of us have gay friends, and that's a stereotype.
Right.
Obviously, just like anybody of any other sort of sexual orientation, you have people that are very extravagant, and you have people that are not extravagant. So where I was thinking with the same thing with you is that this is a bit of a stereotype. Are they taking it in that direction? Because not all gay men are like that.
Yeah. So I had seen a couple previews, and I just really wasn't into it. But then last night, as I was getting ready for bed, because I'm old, Daltz decided to watch the pilot.
I was cheating. I was reading ahead, I must admit.
And he and I heard him laughing through the whole thing, and he said he enjoyed it much more than he thought he would. So tonight I decided to give it a whirl, and I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would as well. It was, once you got past the first 3 minutes or so of kind of the campy over the topness, then everybody kind of calmed down into their respective roles. And it was very touching. I enjoyed the episode quite a bit and I laughed a lot.
It was touching too. I think that I don't remember getting that from the first series. I remember being entertained by it and I remember being informed by it, but I don't remember having sort of the heartstrings. Yeah. And the heartstrings were there in the first episode that you did not see, but they were quite apparent in that second one where the gentleman stands up in the front of all the guys and says, I really appreciate this. And this was a big moment for him because he had intimacy problems and he had challenges in terms of exposing himself, in terms of being somebody who is open to expressing their feelings and stuff like that, and he went out on a limb and he did that, and it was very good.
Yeah, I didn't watch the entire first series. I watched the first couple seasons, maybe 3 seasons, and then the last couple seasons I didn't really watch it. But I don't remember, from what I remember of the original series, it was guys' girlfriends or mothers or sisters calling the Queer Eye people saying, oh my God, my boyfriend.
Intervention.
His toenail fungus is insane. Can you please help this guy out? Can you help me out? So I don't remember if this guy called Queer Eye himself or if somebody else.
It was unclear.
But he was definitely receptive.
But he knew it was coming. It wasn't like he got abducted off the street and taken away somehow.
And I mentioned this to Daltz in the immediate aftermath of the episode being over and us giving each other our impressions. One of the things about makeover shows is that a lot of times people just the makeover subjects resist. And every time, you know, the hairdresser, whoever says, why don't we try this? They're like, no, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, why did you go on the show? Like, this is a makeover show. Like, you know what you signed up for. You came here to be changed because you're unhappy about something or something isn't working for you. So if you don't want to change anything, why'd you come on?
Why are you on the show?
Yeah, so it's like pulling teeth with people, trying to get them to cut a couple inches off their hair or whatever. So I liked that even though this guy was reluctant in the beginning, he wasn't like, no, and fighting them, you know, tooth and nail on it.
Yeah.
He wasn't crazy about the idea, but he still went along with it because he knew it would help him. And then at the end, it was very touching. And, and I enjoyed it. So.
What I liked also about these two episodes that I've seen, and it was a bit of a contrast to the first series, was that both of the makeover guys being made over, were funny. The guy that we watched today, he was very funny. And the guy that I watched in the first episode was very funny. And so that adds another... It wasn't like in the first series where the 5 guys were the stars of the show. And they just happened to swarm in on whoever it was. And they remade him. And this guy, who's usually a straight arrow, ends up looking fabulous in a straight kind of way. It was a little bit different with these new episodes. Whereas they have the straight guys, but they come out and they're actually... It seemed like more participatory in the makeover, and there's a bit of back and forth, and they're joking around with the guy. Like some of the funnier lines in the one we watched today were from the guy who's being made over.
And I do like another change from the original series to this one. They are no longer pretending that this is all taking place on one day.
Right.
Like there aren't enough hours in the day for somebody to go to 2 hours of Taibo and get a haircut and hair dye job and
renovate the house.
Right, and get the house completely redone, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I'm glad that they're finally copping to the fact that, yeah, this took about 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Like, that's a nice element of realism that, hey, it's reality TV, so you kind of need that. So.
I hope this show does well, because I like these kinds of shows where they're informative, entertaining, but also adding a little bit something. It's not just a pure reality TV show where people are trying to survive on an island or whatever.
Right.
Like that's what I got out of the first go around, was like, hey, I can take that tip out of this, or I can do this, or I can do that. But also, from what I was reading about the series before our show, was that in the previous one, they were looking for tolerance, and now they're looking for acceptance in terms of the gay community. So it's also a bit of a movement going on. We have talked previously about Black Panther and what's going on there. We've got something with Queer Eye that is a similar type of mainstream product that everybody can watch. And oh, by the way, the characters are gay.
Yeah.
It's not like a big deal now, or it shouldn't be.
When the original premiered, I don't think gay marriage was even legal in Massachusetts.
Right.
Like, I think that was a year...
2003.
Yeah, I think that was a year or two before it got legalized in Massachusetts, which was ahead of everybody else. So
are you ready for this? That was 15 years ago.
We've come a long way, baby.
Wow. Wow.
For as long as that lasts. And
well, let's not go there.
Moving on.
Because we want to have sponsors. So, moving to the next segment... We're going to go way back in time for Alias Grace.
Not just 15 years ago.
More than 15 years ago. 115 years ago. So you have read the book by Margaret Atwood. If you could give our fine listeners, some of whom are in Sweden, some of whom are celebrating Norwegian gold right now.
Yes.
Tell me and us and them the whole deal.
So Alias Grace, the book, came out in 1996. I read it around that time, sometime in the late 90s.
You were 10 or something like that.
I know. I'm only 29, so I was very precocious.
Wow, you're ahead of your time. Okay, go on.
So I remember not loving the book. Margaret Atwood is my favorite writer, and in the 80s and 90s, she had a streak of a lot of really good books, including The Handmaid's Tale and The Blind Assassin and The Robber Bride. And Alias Grace, as a book, to me, was a misfire. But after seeing the 6-episode miniseries on Netflix, I now want to go back and reread the book because I really enjoyed the miniseries. And books are almost always better than the movies or shows upon which, like that are based on them. So I would definitely be interested in rereading the book. But the gist of the series is in the 1840s, and it's based on a true story. In the 1840s, a maid named Grace was convicted of killing the master of her house and the housekeeper. She and the stable boy were convicted. He got hanged. She ended up with a life sentence that ended up, she received a pardon after I think about 30 or 35 years in prison. So that's kind of the gist of the miniseries.
Historical fiction.
Yeah, in the show, like a shrink, an
American shrink
comes to Canada to interview Grace because
there were no shrinks in Canada.
Because there were no shrinks in Canada at that time, and a group of kindly Methodists, I believe, had taken up Grace as their cause celeb, and they wanted to cause celeb, take a shot.
Wow.
And they wanted to get her pardoned, and they brought this shrink in to help figure out, did Grace kill them because she's evil and she knew what she was doing, or was she kind of an unwitting accomplice to the stable hand? And yeah, I'm not going to let you know how it ends.
Don't spoil it.
Although I'm sure I probably will anyways, because I always end up with a spoiler alert.
That's true.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts on Alias Grace, Dallas?
Well, I'll give our listeners just a little bit more background on Alias Grace, the novel. It was winner of the 1996 Giller Prize, which is a big literary prize in Canada. Finalist for the 1996 Booker Prize.
Which is a huge deal in the UK.
Also, and the 1996 Governor General's Award, which is another big award in Canada. And shortlisted for the 1997 Orange Prize for Fiction, which is more of an international award. Now, that just gives you a sense of where that book landed and what kind of an influence it had. And like Coco said, released in 1996. So this is, previous to this book, this is what Margaret Atwood had written. So The Edible Woman was her first novel. Followed by Surfacing, Lady Oracle, Life Before Man, Bodily Harm, then The Handmaid's Tale, which was 1985, Cat's Eye, which was 1988, and The Robber Bride, which was 1997, and then Alias Grace was 19...
The Robber Bride was definitely before 97.
Sorry, I said 97. It should have been 93.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, that was when I was in high school, even though I'm only 29 years old. So yes. I knew it was definitely before 97.
I misspoke. It was 93. And then Alias Grace, 96. And then followed that was The Blind Assassin in 2000. And then some of her more modern pieces, which have yet to be made into Netflix series. But coming soon.
I think the trilogy that began with Oryx and Crake, I think that's either going to be made into some kind of series or a movie. I believe I vaguely remember reading that somewhere. I didn't.
I'm scanning madly. I can't see it, but
I did not love Oryx and Crake, but that might be another one where I just have to go back and reread it. Because originally when I read The Blind Assassin, I put it down after the first chapter because I didn't like it. And a month later I said, okay, I just spent $25 on this in hardcover. I need to finish this damn book. Yep. And then I picked it back up and I read it and I loved it. And as soon as I finished it, I went back and I reread it from the beginning.
Wow. So the moral of that story, kids, don't give up on the book too early.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Oh. So that was the Mad Adam trilogy, which I did not reference in the novel section, but that was Oryx and Crake, 2003. The Year of the Flood, 2009, and Mad Adam was the conclusion to that trilogy in 2013.
I believe I have all three of those books downstairs.
Do you really?
If you would like to read them.
Oh, I'll give it a shot. Maybe I'll give one of them a shot and see how that goes.
Okay, so getting back to actual Alias Grace.
So Alias Grace, the Netflix show.
What were your thoughts on that?
I liked it. I joined late at your total insistence. So just as you were enticed by my laughing at Queer Eye, I was interested that you were watching Alias Grace, which had piqued my interest. I have not seen The Handmaid's Tale, but based on the reception the series received on Netflix, I went and read the book over the summer, which I had not. As a good Canadian, I had sort of been in Atwood denial.
Oh, dear.
Yes. And I quite enjoyed The Handmaid's Tale. I'm very into dystopian science fiction, and that qualified.
Oh, well, then you'll like the Mad Adam trilogy, because Oryx and Crake is very dystopian.
Very dystopian?
Yeah.
Dystopian-esque. So what did I think of the series? Sarah Gaden, who was the lead character, who was Grace, was fantastic, I thought. She putting on the Irish accent, but meanwhile she was born in Toronto.
Holla.
Yes. A fine place to be born, actually. And I thought she was really good. I bought her as being the twisted protagonist. You didn't really know to believe her or not. She was definitely the unreliable narrator of the movie, and so that was good. I thought she was good. A lot of other good acting in there. A lot of good acting in there, including by Paul Gross, who was formerly of Due South. Some people may recognize that TV show on CBS from way back when he was the Mountie in Due South, who came to Chicago to help solve crimes because that's what Canadian police wear all the time is Mountie uniforms. I'm
very interested in seeing Due South now that you've described this. I hope it's on Netflix.
He also starred in a movie that I didn't tell you about previously, and it was called, it was one of the biggest comedy hits of all time in Canada. It was called Men with Brooms. And of course, what was it about? It was about curling.
Oh, yeah.
So Olympics, if you're all fired up about the Olympics and curling right now, and you're looking to address that curling Jones that you've got, go out and rent Men with Brooms, if you can find it anywhere. I have a copy of it. You want to call me, we can watch it together.
Is it on Betamax? Or?
It's on one of those big, huge reel cans that you used to get from the library when you rented a projector.
That's awesome.
So I was quite impressed with the whole deal, the whole Alias Grace TV show. I like the characters. I like the setting. I like the. To me, this is probably another whole other show that we could do, but movies and TV shows, and in this case, a series that has a book for source material, I can tell that right away, or at least I think I can, and it always appeals to me because the dialogue is richer and more believable, and the setting is more again believable, and the characters seem to develop more than they do in a movie. I thought this was really well done in terms of the fact that it was a series, it was a book, but they essentially when you, obviously people know this, but when you take a book and turn it into a movie's only an hour and a half, 2 hours long. And so stuff is going to get left out because you have a rich, deep mine of characters and storylines and things like that just don't get covered.
Right.
You don't have time for it. But when you have a 6-episode series that we watched, and it was about 45, 50 minutes.
Yeah, per episode.
An episode. You have much more time to develop the characters and do flashbacks and flash forwards. And I think that was pretty important to this series because you were able to develop the characters, but you're also able to introduce some ambiguity and some doubt, which I think is important to this story.
Right. Well, speaking of, do you think she did it?
Well, does that qualify as a spoiler? Because if you haven't seen it...
Well, maybe not. I mean, like you said, there's room for doubt either way. So, and I already gave away that she got pardoned. So, I mean, so we're not... All we're spoiling is whether we think that she did it or not. Yeah.
I think she did. What do you think?
Well, I don't really remember a whole lot of the book, so this is just going strictly on the miniseries. I could see it going either way. The problem is that Margaret Atwood, as a writer, and I say it's a problem, but it's not really a problem, is that she loves to write about like gender themes and women's roles, and this is taking place in the 1840s, 1850s, so women had very, very limited, rigid roles back then. There's only so much you could do. So it was kind of, I mean, it's basically a Madonna whore complex. Like, is she the wide-eyed, innocent naif who unwittingly got suckered into, being an accomplice and ultimately a victim of this guy? Or is she the evil, foul temptress who convinced him to do it? So it's...
Well, and we also have this so-called, so one of her co-conspirators has a signed confession, and then gets hanged. And we have that as part of the narrative. So his confession is introduced at a certain stage. So why I'm spoiling that part of it for everybody is that introduces doubt. Because all of a sudden you have essentially two narrators at certain points, and you don't know which to believe. And it's like any sort of, this has been done ad nauseum to great effect in some ways, but the fact that a lot of movies will do this double story thing, and you don't know which narrator to believe, and somewhere in the middle, it's like life, somewhere in the middle is the truth when you have two stories.
Right. But then you also have the neighbor who, in his testimony, which ultimately convicted her, says one thing, but then later after she's pardoned, he kind of recants and says, I'm really sorry, the lawyers told me to say that. So
he was a young boy, and he got twisted around in arguments and didn't know which way was up.
Yeah, so I
think he was just saying that so he could get in her pants.
Yeah, because
at the end
he wanted to be her sweetheart.
He did.
That is.
Well, he got down on his knee and
he did, and he gave her some kind of weird blue ring or something.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know
like
what
I
that
didn't.
was.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that was an old bottle cap or something like that. Old beer. All those tabs they used to have on pop cans.
Yeah, totally.
One of those.
It's like a Labatt tab or something.
It was a Labatt tab. Yeah. So, it was Richmond Hill after all.
Oh, that's
Ontario.
True. Yeah. So I would have to go back and read the book to see if that influences me one way or the other. But I mean,
so you're pressing me on an answer, but you're not giving us yours.
It's kind of also like the French Lieutenant's Woman, right? Because there are 3 different endings in the. Have you read the French Lieutenant's Woman?
Yeah, I think I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah. So there's college. 3 different. Yeah, that's when I read it. There's 3 different endings in the French Lieutenant's Woman, and each one of them, it kind of goes along with gender roles and gender stereotypes, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And Margaret Atwood loves to write about gender roles, so. Yeah. I would have to go back and reread the book to figure out what I think she's trying to say. If even she knows what she's trying to say. I don't know. She might have purposely left it a little ambiguous. I don't know. She's probably saying that she thinks she did it, but
she was messing with us is what she was doing.
Yeah, which she loves to do.
Well, as you're an author, and I'm in some ways I am an author too. So
You're published on Amazon.com.
I am, which had 2 downloads the last time I checked. But
ooh.
But I can say that as an author, I'm not really an author, but
no, you're not.
I think that the author can conceivably play with the reader that way, especially if you're somebody like Margaret Atwood who has put out a few books and knows what she's doing.
Right. And a master wordsmith.
Right. And a master plot smith as well. So I think that I think it's open to interpretation, but I'm leaning in the she did it category just because of, not based on the book because I did not read the book, but based on the series and looking at the character and the way it was portrayed and the glint in her eye and the subtleties.
But at the same time, you could say maybe the glint in the eye came about from, at that point, she'd been in prison for 20 years or whatever, and she'd gone through a whole lot of stuff that nobody should have to go through if they're innocent, and that hardened her. So
I think that's the brilliant part of this whole series is that there's no clear-cut answer.
Yeah.
And there's no happy ending. There's no sad ending, but there's no fantastic, Hollywood ending. And I think that's another reason that this is a book and not a screenplay, an original screenplay. Right.
Like you said, everything is a shade of gray. And I think it's also...
Did I say that?
Yeah, something to that effect.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth noting that the housekeeper, Anna Paquin, and the master of the house...
Paul Gross.
He actually wasn't really a terrible person, but Anna Paquin was a pretty horrible person. She can be a horrible person. I mean, there's no perfect victim.
Right. And I think I think Atwood was trying to convey that as well, is that Paul Gross's character, I don't think I'm revealing anything because this is part of the story, he got killed, but to me, he wasn't really doing anything wrong. In those days, he was accused of sleeping with the help. That was his big crime, and people were talking like it was the horrible thing. Now, in those days, it probably was. He wasn't married, so there was no infidelity there. It just was he was fooling around with the help, and that was seen as a bad thing. Whereas nowadays, what would be the equivalent to that? I don't even want to go there. Like if you've got somebody and they're doing something horrible, it's going to be much... So the comparison, I guess, is what I'm saying is we can't really look at it with today's eyes as to what was controversial. Maybe today we'd look at something on a similar scale and be like, oh, yeah, what an evil guy. So maybe it would be justified in some ways that he would not get killed, but certainly be a villain. But he wasn't a villain, I don't think. In this.
No, he seemed like a pretty congenial guy.
He's a guy I'd go curling with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You go down to Chicago and solve crimes with?
I think they should reboot that.
Oh my God, could you imagine?
All the reboots in the world? Okay, CBC, if you're out there listening, Due South Part 2, or what would they call it? It would have to be Mountie on the
Mile.
Mountie on the Mile.
Miracle Mountie? I don't know. I don't know. We're going to have to come up with a better name for this.
But he was like Dudley Do-Right, only he was like a human Dudley Do-Right. You know who Dudley Do-Right
is?
Yes.
Yeah.
So speaking of curling, we're going to go to our last segment here, which was the mystery segment, which we are teasing the listeners with, and hopefully you're still with us to get to this point. I say curling because this person sometimes has curly hair.
I thought you were going to go for the Olympics, and I was like, but wait, neither one of us watched any of the Olympics whatsoever, so how are we going to talk about this?
Okay, here's our Olympic segment. This Olympic segment brought to you by Kellogg's because...
I like Raisin Bran.
Exactly. And that's what happens when you win a gold medal. You go on the front of... Oh, no, that's a different...
Oh, that's Wheaties.
I
think that's General Mills.
Whoops. Okay, I blew the first commercial.
Nobody is going to give us any money now.
Okay, so our Olympic segment... That was sort of like the Russian national anthem. I did that out of rebellion because you couldn't play the Russian national anthem at the Olympics.
Oh, really?
Because of the whole doping thing. Here's my take on the Olympics. Didn't watch it. Didn't care.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So now the final category. That was brought to you by...
General Mills.
General Mills, not Kellogg's.
Actually, you can intro this. I'm going to make sure that Wheaties is definitely General Mills.
Okay, so I'll introduce the third category while you're looking that up.
Okay.
We are talking, of course, about Jennifer Aniston's divorce.
Yes, General Mills.
She was divorcing Justin Theroux.
And
Did I pronounce that correctly?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And another thing we just don't care about, but it's been a huge story for the past week and a half since it broke, so we thought we should...
It's not like we're following this stuff a lot, but...
Right. If I were still gossip blogging, this is all I would have done for the past week and a half, because this is a huge gossip story, because so many stories are coming out about this. It was on the cover of People this week. A lot of stories have come out in Page Six and other sites.
Give us a little bit of background. So how long have they been together? Where did they meet? Anything that you can share?
So, oh God. So they got together when I was gossip blogging, which was...
Did you introduce them?
I did. Actually.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Because you were a big deal in those days,
I was
right?
like, hey, Jen, I got a guy I want you to meet.
I got to totally hook you up.
So they... I'm not even going to go into the beginning of their relationship, but let's just say it's shady. And they got together after he dumped his partner of 14 years, a costume designer named Heidi. And
is she a homewrecker, Jennifer Aniston?
Yes.
Is that libelous?
No. Moving on.
Sorry. All right.
So that's why I'm not going to go into the beginning of that relationship.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I should have taken that subtle hint that you dropped.
So they got together like 2012-ish, and they were engaged. They were together for about 4 years, and then Brad and Angelina got engaged, and then, oh my God, now Jennifer Aniston is engaged too. And they were engaged for about 1.5 to 2 years before they finally made it legal.
It was purely coincidental, wasn't it?
Purely coincidental. And then now they've been married for less than 2 years, and now they're getting divorced. And all the stories that are coming out in the wake of the split say that he's just too edgy and arty and New York hipster scene for her, and her, more banal California beach life. And I'm bored. I want this to be over.
They met on the set, I should say, of Wanderlust.
Remember how I told you all this and I explained all of this, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to get sued?
Yeah, but I'm just saying where they met.
Okay.
These are just facts. You can't sue for facts.
All right.
Also, Justin Theroux is an actor and screenwriter. He apparently has been in some of my favorite movies, which I didn't know until just now. He was in American Psycho, which is not one of my favorite movies, but there it is. Zoolander, Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle. He was in Miami Vice as Detective Larry Zito. So I'm a huge Miami Vice fan from the TV days, and I watched the movie, and the movie was fine, but he was Zito, which he wasn't Zito-esque. He was in Tropic Thunder.
I think he wrote Tropic Thunder.
He also wrote and was the executive producer of Tropic Thunder. He was the writer for Iron Man 2. Mm-hmm. He was in Megamind. He was the writer for Rock of Ages, and he was in The Girl on the Train. Of course he was on The Girl on the Train. He was Tom Watson, not to be confused with Tom Watson, the golfer. That would be an odd kind of mix. He was he was in the Lego Ninjago movie. He was Lord Garmadon, which was a huge hit with my girls. He was also in Star Wars The Last Jedi as a master codebreaker.
I don't remember seeing him in that at all.
And it's a cameo, apparently.
So he's
everywhere. Sex and the City.
He's everywhere, but he's also, until he got The Leftovers, I don't think he was really like a recognizable like face or name. And her team tried really, really hard to turn him into a recognizable face and name, and it didn't work. Like, he signed with CAA, which is her agency, right after they got together, and he doesn't have a whole lot to show for it. So,
well, he's a writer of some renown too. I'm just looking at this entry on Wikipedia, which doesn't lie, and he was known for his essay "Civil Disobedience" as well. Oh no, wait, that's Henry David Thoreau.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Did Justin Theroux go up to Walden Woods and and moon about?
And moon. He did some romantic mooning, not the kind of mooning that I was doing in college. I can tell you that much. So, are we disgusted? Where are we going with this?
I mean, I think they were clearly incompatible before they got married. So why did they get married?
Yeah.
Like, they knew he liked to live in New York and she liked to live in LA, and that's kind of a huge deal.
She sounds like she was like a homebody, and he's not. He's like an out and about party kind of guy.
Yeah. So there have just been a million stories since they split up about how they just couldn't make it work. And I'm like, well, of course not. If you never spend time in the same town, then
it's hard.
It's really hard. Like, Daltz and I were apart for 8 months, only half a continent away, not a whole continent away, and that was not awesome.
And we didn't have our own private jets to fly us back and forth either.
Exactly. We just had, like, FaceTime.
So the modern romance.
Yeah, so we made it work on not friends' money. So, but we didn't want to stay that far apart forever. So we figured it out. And these two, and she's going back to the narrative that she dined out on for 15 years in the tabloid press, which is sad sack Jen. Like, no, girl, you're 49. Your narrative should be single and loving it. Like, you look fantastic and you've got a pile of cash. Like, you don't need a man. Like, you especially don't need some faux hipster skinny jeans wearing middle-aged loser.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean,
harsh.
Not that I think she's like some huge prize herself, but she could.
Oh, even harsher.
But she could do so much better, and that's the narrative her team needs to be pushing. And instead, they're going back to the infamous pity party that she had with Vanity Fair after she and Brad Pitt split up. And just stop it. You don't need to do that. I'm tired of this. I don't want to read another 15 years of poor Jen can't keep a man stories. Like, let it go. Be like Elsa, let it go.
Let it go. Look at you with the Frozen reference.
I've never seen Frozen.
That's not for lack of trying. So the last movie she was in that I've heard of was Storks.
And this is the thing.
2016.
Her talent and career do not remotely warrant the kind of attention she gets from the gossip press. She is still a thing because she got dumped by Brad Pitt.
Well, I'm just looking at the movies that, like, she was in. I loved Office Space. I thought she was great in Office Space. She played a good role in that. But since then, I can't think of anything that I see here on her filmography that would really blow me away.
Like, when Friends was over, she had exactly the kind of career that somebody with her talent should have. But she's still a huge deal because she got dumped by Brad Pitt.
So I think what's going to come out of this whole podcast experience is we're going to have lawyers from Boston contact us because of Marky Mark, and lawyers from LA contact us because of Jennifer Aniston.
Right. Marky Mark has now ceded his "I'ma beat you up" mantle to Jennifer Aniston, who's going to have Chelsea Handler come after us and make bad jokes about us. And actually, I don't think they're friends anymore. So,
all right,
there you go.
So on that note,
like I said, we're ending on the down note again this week.
Well, we're gonna entice people to come back because at this point in the show, even though we're signing off, I'm going to tease everybody and say coming up before the Oscars will be the Coco and Dulcies, our special edition, where we pick our winners for key categories at the Oscars. And we're very excited about that. We're going to have a big red carpet thing. We'll probably, in our local community theater here, we'll probably have some sort of speech and discussion series. We'll probably have souvenir paraphernalia, like maybe towels or shot glasses or any number of things. We're very excited about the Coco and Dulcies. We'll get swag bags to everybody who comes to the special events. So this is a really big deal that is probably not going to happen, but we're very excited about it anyway.
Or it's going to be the two of us in our sweats and our pajama bottoms, like sitting at the dining room table, talking into a mic like usual.
Cursing at the TV, not watching the Oscars.
No, I'm absolutely not watching the Oscars.
So on that note, it's been another fun week talking about entertainment and buzz.
You know, we have a pop culture podcast, but we don't actually watch anything. We don't watch the Oscars. We don't watch the Olympics.
We're sort of like the alternative pop culture.
We're the highbrow pop culture.
We're taking the high road on the cultural highway of America.
I like it.
That's our new tagline, actually.
The cultural highway of America, not the highway to hell? Or the...
Well, yeah. It's the same. It's paved with the same intentions, isn't it?
That's true. Yeah. Okay.
And for another week, I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Dalt.
Good night, everybody.